The story begins at a time when Earth had finally found peace, not just among its own nations but across the stars. Humanity had grown beyond its blue planet, building colonies on distant moons and faraway worlds. For the first time in history, humans were not alone. They had made friends out there, real friends. Among them were the Sirians, a gentle race of beings who had welcomed humans with kindness when the first explorers arrived in their part of the galaxy. The Sirians were unlike anyone Earth had ever met. They were peaceful and wise, known for their calm nature and the way they could communicate without words. They didn't fight wars or build weapons. Instead, they built gardens that stretched for miles across their silver cities, where the air shimmered like crystal. They taught humans how to use clean energy, how to grow food in space, and how to travel faster than light. In return, Earth shared with them its creativity, its music, and its courage. Together, they created the United Alliance of Worlds, a promise that humans and Sirians would stand side by side, no matter what challenges came their way. For years, the alliance brought progress. Colonies flourished. Trade routes opened. Children from Earth were even born on Sirian soil, and Sirians visited Earth's oceans and forests with wonder in their eyes. It was a time when everyone believed peace had truly conquered the galaxy. But peace is a fragile thing. It began quietly, ships disappearing in the outer colonies, communication lines going silent. At first, people thought it was just technical failure.
Space was full of dangers after all. Asteroids, solar storms, and the unknown.
But then came the reports. Ships found floating in empty space, their hulls burnt, their crews missing. The Sirian Council tried to stay calm. They believed that whoever was behind this could be reasoned with. That was their way, to seek understanding instead of war. Earth, however, grew uneasy. Old memories of human conflict made many suspicious. The Alliance sent patrol ships hoping to find answers. What they found instead was horror. One of the patrol teams picked up a distress signal coming from a Sirian colony near the edge of their territory. It was faint, broken, filled with static, but the message was clear enough to freeze every heartbeat on Earth. They came without warning. Then silence. When the rescue fleet arrived days later, it was already too late. The entire Sirian colony was gone, not destroyed in battle, simply erased as if it had never existed. The forests that once glowed with life were now blackened. The beautiful silver towers lay in ruins, and in the center of what used to be the capital, there was a strange symbol burned into the ground, a circle made of fire, surrounded by sharp lines that no one could read. That was the first sign of the Dravex Empire. No one knew where they came from. No one even knew what they looked like. The few transmissions that managed to escape before being cut off showed nothing but flashes of dark shapes moving through the stars. Massive, silent ships that swallowed light itself. Within weeks, the Sirians lost 3 more colonies. Their peaceful fleet stood no chance. They had no weapons, no defenses strong enough to stop the invasion. The Sirians tried to contact the Dravex, sending messages of peace and understanding, but every signal went unanswered. Earth could only watch in disbelief. Every day, new reports came in. Cities gone, entire planets left lifeless. Billions of lives were being lost, and the galaxy's most peaceful race was being wiped out. The human colonies closest to the Sirian border began evacuating, fearing they would be next. Panic spread across the alliance, but there was one thing that everyone agreed on. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a message. The Dravex were not here to talk. They were here to erase. On Earth, the news played everywhere, on screens, in streets, in homes. People watched in silence as footage showed the last transmissions from Sirian worlds. Their beautiful cities turned to dust in moments. Many cried. Others clenched their fists in anger. Some blamed Earth for not helping sooner. In secret, meetings were held deep underground, far from the public eye, in the heart of the Earth Defense Council. It was a gathering of leaders, scientists, and commanders from every major nation. They watched the same images, felt the same grief, and came to a silent understanding. Humanity had known pain before. It had survived wars, disasters, and countless mistakes. But this was different. This time, the pain came from watching friends die, friends who had once trusted them with open hearts. One of the oldest commanders spoke first. His voice was heavy, quiet, but steady. "If they can destroy the Sirians, they can destroy us," he said. "And they will, unless we show them that Earth does not kneel." The room fell silent for a long time. Everyone knew what that meant. For years, Earth had avoided building large-scale war fleets. After forming the alliance, humanity had turned its focus to peacekeeping, not war. The great factories that once built warships had been turned into energy plants. The old blueprints of powerful weapons had been buried, locked away in secret archives, projects too dangerous to continue. But now those archives would be opened again. That night, the order was given. The operation's name was short and simple: Vengeance Dawn. While the rest of the world mourned, hidden shipyards beneath the oceans and within the mountains came alive again. Massive doors opened, and the sound of machines filled the dark tunnels. Engineers and scientists began working around the clock. Blueprints that hadn't seen daylight in decades were spread out on metal tables. They were plans for something Earth had once promised never to build again: super warships, each one capable of changing the course of a war. But this time, there was no other choice. Humanity could not just watch anymore. Among the people, the mood began to change. The grief slowly turned into determination. Artists painted murals of the lost Syrians. Children placed candles near spaceports. The phrase "for the Syrians" became a symbol, a reminder that Earth was not just fighting for itself, but for every being that believed in peace. Meanwhile, the first stages of construction began. Every shipyard, every engineering facility that could be reactivated was put to work. The brightest minds were brought together under tight secrecy. They worked day and night, fueled by anger and hope. Some didn't sleep for days. Others volunteered without pay, saying, "If this is what it takes to protect what's left, then so be it." News about Earth's secret project began to spread quietly through the colonies. People whispered about it: the return of the old warships, the kind that hadn't been seen since humanity's darkest wars. Some were afraid. Others were relieved. For the first time since the invasion began, there was a spark of hope. No one knew when or how the Dravex would strike again, but one thing was certain: Earth would not face them unprepared. Somewhere above the planet, in the silence of orbit, a group of engineers watched the sun rise over Earth's horizon. They had been working on something enormous, something the world wasn't ready to see yet. As the light of dawn spread across the curve of the planet, one of them whispered, "They took our friends, but now they'll see what we can do." And with that quiet promise, the fate of Earth and the galaxy began to change. The stars had witnessed peace for a time. Now they were about to witness humanity's awakening. After the Syrians were gone, Earth was no longer the same. Cities that once sparkled with joy felt heavier now. People went to work, but their hearts were not in it. The screens on every street still showed the silent images of the Syrian worlds. Forests turned into ashes. Oceans turned dark. It wasn't just another tragedy from far away. It felt personal. Humanity had lost its closest friends. Inside government halls, meetings never stopped. Every major nation sent its leaders to the same hidden base beneath the Atlantic Ocean. It was called the Ark Facility, once built for peace talks, now filled with arguments, decisions, and anger. The air there always felt cold, not because of the machines, but because everyone knew the truth. They couldn't bring the Syrians back, but they could make sure their killers never touched another world again. When the meeting began that morning, the room was silent. Only the soft hum of the machines could be heard. A large screen in the center showed the last image from the Syrian capital, a bright blue planet covered in smoke. Everyone stared at it, unable to look away. Then a voice broke the silence. "They didn't just attack them," said one of the commanders. "They erased them. If we stay quiet, we'll be next." A few people nodded. Others looked unsure. Humanity had spent years avoiding war. The alliance was built on peace. If they now chose to build weapons again, they would be breaking everything they had promised to the galaxy. But deep down, everyone knew peace couldn't survive without protection. After hours of quiet debate, the decision was made. The Earth Defense Council officially approved Operation Vengeance Dawn. The plan was simple in words but massive in scale. Rebuild Earth's lost warship fleet. Create weapons strong enough to defend not only humanity, but every peaceful world left in the galaxy. When the decision was announced, the world didn't cheer. There was no applause. People simply looked at each other in silence, knowing what it meant. Old shipyards that had been closed for decades came back to life. Massive doors opened under oceans and deserts. Engineers, pilots, and scientists were called from every corner of Earth and the colonies. Many didn't even know what they were signing up for. They just knew it was something that mattered. Far beneath the surface, deep under the Atlantic waters, a new command base was built. It was designed to stay hidden from any eyes in the sky, even from Earth's own satellites. There, the project began, Project Leviathan. It started with dust-covered blueprints pulled from the archives. They were plans for ships that had never been built, ships that were once considered too powerful, too dangerous. Some of the scientists stared at the old papers for hours, almost in disbelief. These designs were created long ago during Earth's last major war, and then locked away forever. But now those forgotten ideas were Earth's only hope. The new warships wouldn't just be stronger, they would be alive with intelligence. Not like normal machines, but something more. Each ship would be guided by a quantum AI, capable of making decisions faster than any human mind. They would be covered in energy shields that could bend light and powered by cores that used a new kind of fusion energy, something developed from Syrian technology before they were lost. Every person working on the project carried the same thought. This is for them. Day and night the work never stopped. Massive hangars glowed with white light as workers moved like shadows, welding, wiring, testing. Some hadn't gone home in weeks. The only thing keeping them awake was the thought of what had happened to the Syrians, and what could happen to Earth if they failed. On the first day of testing, the base shook as the prototype reactor came online. The deep hum echoed through the tunnels, and for a brief second, the power lights flickered. Everyone held their breath. Then the reading stabilized and a wave of relief spread across the control room. One of the engineers whispered, "It works. We actually did it." But it was just the beginning. Back on the surface, the public only heard small pieces of information. News reports said Earth was preparing new defense systems. No one outside the project knew how large or powerful these systems truly were. Still, hope began to spread. After months of fear and loss, people finally felt that Earth was doing something. In small towns and big cities alike, you could hear the same words in quiet conversations. For the Syrians, it became more than just a phrase. It was written on walls, spoken in schools, printed on flags. It reminded everyone that this fight wasn't only for humanity, it was for those who couldn't fight back anymore. On Mars, inside the orbital yards, hundreds of workers stood on giant platforms, watching the skeleton of the first new warship take shape. The structure was massive, the size of a city. It shimmered under artificial sunlight, its metal skin reflecting the red dust of Mars. It was called EHS Titan, the first of its kind. The name was chosen not out of pride, but out of promise. The Titan would be Earth's protector. It would stand where no one else could. Weeks turned into months. Each test brought new challenges: reactor instability, shield failures, navigation errors. There were setbacks and arguments, but no one gave up. Every mistake was a lesson. Every problem solved brought them closer to their goal. In the meantime, the Dravex fleets were still moving through the stars. Distant outposts went silent, and human scouts sometimes caught brief flashes of their ships before losing signal. The fear never went away. It only grew stronger. The Council knew time was running out. The warships had to be finished before the Dravex reached Earth's borders. One evening, a storm raged above the Atlantic as the project leaders gathered in the control chamber. On the screen before them, the Titan floated in low orbit, finished at last. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Its hull was sleek, covered with layers of silver armor. Rows of energy lines pulsed faintly along its body, glowing like veins of light. Inside, the crew ran final checks. The hum of the engines grew louder, and the control panels lit up one by one. The AI system, still nameless, came online with a soft tone that echoed through the ship. The engineers stood in silence, staring at what they had created. Humanity had built many ships before, but never something like this. When the launch sequence began, every system responded perfectly. The engines flared to life, pushing the Titan slowly forward. Through the viewing glass, the people in the control room watched as the ship glided into the darkness above. For a moment, there was no sound, just quiet awe. Then someone whispered, "She's alive." The room filled with quiet applause. Some cried. Others smiled weakly. It wasn't just pride, it was relief. They had done it. Humanity now had a weapon strong enough to defend itself. But outside, in the endless night of space, far beyond the reach of Earth's scanners, the Dravex ships were watching. They had seen the energy burst from the Titan's launch. They had learned something dangerous. Earth was no longer defenseless. Down on the planet, no one knew this yet. The workers celebrated quietly, not realizing their victory had already drawn attention. Still, that night, for the first time since the Syrians fell, people on Earth slept with a sense of safety. They believed the worst was over. They didn't know it was only the beginning. In the months that followed, more ships were built, each one more advanced than the last.
ES Atlas, ES Vanguard, EHS Horizon.
Each carried the same emblem on its hull, a symbol of two stars intertwined representing Earth and Syria. The people began to believe again. Children looked up at the night sky, pointing at the bright moving lights, asking if those were the new guardians of Earth. Parents nodded and smiled, hiding their worry but holding on to hope. But deep within the command centers, the council members knew something the public didn't. The Titan's launch had changed everything. It had sent a message into the stars, one that couldn't be taken back, and soon an answer would come. In the months that followed the Titan's launch, Earth entered a new age of silence. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence that comes before a storm. Deep underground, across secret bases and hidden stations, the sound of machines never stopped. Sparks flashed through giant assembly halls as metal giants slowly took shape. The building of Earth's war fleet had begun. From the frozen mines of Luna to the red dust of Mars, workers gave everything they had. There were no weekends, no holidays, and no one complained. Every bolt, every wire, every circuit carried meaning. They weren't just building ships, they were building Earth's promise. The promise that what happened to the Syrians would never happen again. The first ship, the Titan, had already shown what humans were capable of. It was enormous, a moving city in the sky. Its engines burned blue like lightning, and its AI could control every system with a thought. But the engineers weren't satisfied. They wanted more power, more range, more precision. They had seen what the Dravex could do, and they knew humanity would get only one chance to fight back. So the second and third ships were designed differently. The EHS Vanguard was built to lead attacks, faster and sharper than the Titan. The EHS Horizon, larger and more advanced, could repair other ships mid-battle. It carried medical bays, living quarters, and even gardens where crew members could walk and breathe real air. Each ship had a soul of its own, a mix of human creativity and Syrian-inspired technology. The Syrian blueprints had survived in fragments, tiny bits of data recovered from ruined colonies. Those fragments became gold for Earth scientists. They were used to design new energy cores, new shield systems, and communication networks that could stretch across galaxies. In a way, the Syrians were still helping humanity fight, even after they were gone. Every week, the fleet grew. More ships were launched, their hulls shining under the glow of artificial suns. People on Earth would look up at the sky and sometimes see a bright moving light, not knowing it was one of their protectors rising into orbit. There was pride in every heart, but also fear. Everyone knew that somewhere out there, the Dravex were still watching. Back in the Ark facility where the Earth Defense Council met, the atmosphere had changed. Once full of tension and argument, now it was filled with focus. The leaders were not just politicians anymore. They had become strategists, planners of survival. They gathered around holographic displays showing the fleet's progress, the positions of colonies, and distant signals from deep space. Every decision felt heavy. Every mistake could cost millions of lives. But even among all this seriousness, there was something else growing, a quiet sense of unity. For the first time in centuries, humans from every nation, language, and belief worked as one. They didn't argue about borders or power. They simply wanted to protect their home. The loss of the Syrians had done something no treaty ever could. It had united humanity under one cause. On the Titan, life was busy but filled with meaning. The crew trained every day, running drills, testing systems, learning how to move as one body. The ship's AI, an emotionless voice that many came to respect, guided them through every process. The Titan wasn't just a weapon. It had become a symbol of strength and responsibility. When the ship's engines roared for the first long-range flight test, people across Earth stopped to watch. The sound wasn't loud enough to reach the surface, but somehow everyone felt it. As the Titan accelerated into deep space, it left a glowing trail that stretched across the stars like a blue scar. Children pointed at the sky, shouting in excitement. For them, it wasn't just a ship. It was hope flying. While Earth worked day and night, there was growing concern among the intelligence divisions. They had detected strange energy bursts far beyond the colonies, patterns that didn't match any known source. Some feared it was the Dravex preparing for another strike. Others believed it was something worse, something new. But without direct proof, they couldn't act. So they kept building. One evening, as the sun set over the Atlantic, the Titan's captain received a coded transmission. It was from a distant listening post orbiting near the ruins of a Syrian world. The message was short, full of static, but the few words that came through were enough to freeze every soul in the control room. They're coming back. The Dravex fleet had reappeared. It started as small readings, energy spikes, faint distortions, but within hours it became clear. A massive armada was moving toward the center of the galaxy, heading straight for the old Alliance routes. They weren't hiding anymore. Back on Earth, the Council went into emergency session. Holograms flickered as faces appeared around the great table, all of them tired but alert. One of the commanders said quietly, "It's happening again." There was silence, then another voice replied, "No, this time we're ready." Orders were sent out instantly. Every shipyard stopped construction and shifted focus to combat readiness. The Titan and Vanguard were recalled from testing. The Horizon, still in early deployment, was ordered to support colonies near the border. The once secret fleet was now Earth's first line of defense. In cities, citizens were told to remain calm. Broadcasts played messages of unity, showing images of the shining warships rising into the dark. People stood together in parks and rooftops watching them ascend. It was beautiful and terrifying at once, humans sending their creations into a sky that suddenly didn't feel so friendly anymore. Inside the Titan, the atmosphere was tense. The corridors were filled with movement, technicians checking systems, pilots preparing for launch, engineers tightening bolts on reactor panels. No one complained, no one questioned. They all knew what was coming. The loss of the Syrians still burned in their memories. But this time there was something else, a quiet determination to make things right. When the Titan left orbit, Earth's night sky seemed to shimmer for a moment. It was followed by the Vanguard and Horizon, each ship glowing faintly as their engines engaged. Together, they formed the first human war fleet to ever leave the solar system. Their destination, the edge of Syrian space. The journey was long and filled with tension. Out there, space felt different, colder, emptier, haunted. The wreckage of Syrian ships still floated among the stars, silent reminders of what had been lost. As the Titan's lights passed over them, some of the crew felt tears in their eyes. They didn't know the Syrians personally, but they felt like family. For days, the fleet moved in silence. Then, as they neared the coordinates of the last known Syrian colony, the sensors picked up movement, faint but clear. Dozens of signatures appeared on the radar. The Dravex were there, but something unexpected happened. The enemy ships didn't attack right away. They just hovered, dark and massive, blocking the stars. It was as if they were waiting for what no one knew. Inside the Titan, tension filled the air. The commanders stood in the control center, eyes fixed on the glowing dots ahead. Every system was armed, every hand ready. Then slowly, one of the Dravex ships began to move forward. It was the first time humanity saw them up close. The ship was enormous, twice the size of the Titan, its surface covered in jagged black armor that seemed to absorb light. There were no visible windows, no markings, just a silent presence that felt like a shadow moving through space. The Titan sent out a transmission. It was a simple message. "This is Earth. You have destroyed our allies. Leave now." No reply came. For long seconds, nothing happened. Then all at once, the Dravex ship turned sharply and vanished into warp space, disappearing like smoke. But the readings showed something else. Thousands more signals moving in the distance, forming patterns. It wasn't an attack yet. It was a test. The Dravex were studying them. The fleet stayed in formation, ready for anything. The crews barely slept, waiting for orders, for movement, for anything. Every heartbeat felt louder in the silence. Back on Earth, the Council watched the data streams in real time. No one spoke. They all knew this was the beginning of something far greater than a battle. It was the beginning of a war for survival. And as the Titan floated silently above the ruins of a lost world, one thought filled every heart. Humanity was no longer a child among the stars. It had grown. It had bled. And now, it was ready. The stars that had once seemed peaceful now looked like the calm before a storm that Earth itself had unleashed, and one that was only just beginning to rise. The silence of space had never felt so heavy. For days the fleet waited near the ruins of the old Syrian colony, where everything had started. The Titan floated quietly among the remains, its bright lights shining over broken towers and drifting pieces of ancient metal. The once beautiful planet below was nothing but dust now, wrapped in clouds of gray. Every person on board could feel the weight of that place. It wasn't just a battlefield, it was a grave. Some crew members placed small holographic candles near the windows, letting them float in the air, glowing softly. It was their way of paying respect to the Syrians who had once lived there. But everyone knew they couldn't stay in mourning for long. The Dravex were out there, watching, moving, waiting. Every few hours, sensors picked up faint energy signatures that vanished as soon as they appeared. It was like being hunted by ghosts. Inside the Titan's command room, the crew worked quietly. Lights flickered across the massive screen showing the positions of all three ships, Titan, Vanguard, and Horizon. They moved together, staying close, protecting each other. Every decision mattered now. Then one day the silence broke. A signal came through the long-range scanner, strong, rhythmic, and impossible to ignore. It wasn't random noise. It was a message. The Dravex had sent it. The sound filled the command center, a deep, echoing pulse that felt more like a vibration than a voice. The translation systems tried to decode it, but the meaning was still unclear. Only a few words came through. "Your turn," that was all. Just 2 words. The room went silent. Every heartbeat seemed to stop. It was the kind of message that didn't need to be explained. The Dravex weren't here to talk. They were here to finish what they had started. Within minutes, the radar screens lit up. Dozens of red signals appeared on the outer edges, then hundreds. The enemy fleet had arrived. For a moment, everyone just stared. The Dravex ships were massive, dark, triangular vessels with glowing lines running along their sides. They moved in perfect formation, spreading out across the void like a storm swallowing the stars. Back on Earth, the Defense Council received the data in real time. Every person in that underground room could see it. The largest fleet humanity had ever faced. Yet no one spoke of retreat. The order came quietly but firmly. "Hold the line." The Titan moved into position. Its engines glowed a deep blue and energy rippled along its shields like waves of light. The Vanguard and Horizon followed, forming a triangle around the Titan. For the first time in history, Earth's warship stood face to face with the force that had destroyed the Syrians. On the main communication channel, a single voice spoke. It was calm, clear, and filled with purpose. To the Dravex fleet, it said, "You destroyed peaceful worlds. You erased our allies. This is your warning. Leave this sector now." There was no response, only silence. Then, one by one, the Dravex ships began to glow. Their weapons were powering up. Back on Earth, people gathered in front of screens watching the live feed. The world held its breath. No one knew what would happen next. The moment stretched into eternity. And then it began. The Dravex ships released a massive burst of energy that rippled through space. The human ships shook but held their ground. Alarms rang through the corridors, lights flickered, and systems strained, but the shields held strong. The energy fields created using Syrian technology absorbed the first wave. Inside the Titan, the crew didn't panic. They moved with precision, following every command. Their eyes were steady, their hands firm. They had trained for this moment, and they knew what they were fighting for. "Shield stable," a voice reported. "All systems green." Then for the first time, the Titan answered. A brilliant beam of blue light fired forward, slicing through the darkness and striking one of the Dravex ships. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but everyone could see the shock wave ripple through the enemy formation. It wasn't just a shot. It was a message. Humanity had arrived. From that moment, the battle in space became something no one had ever witnessed before. The warships moved like dancers in a deadly rhythm. The Vanguard darted between enemy formations, its smaller frame allowing it to move with incredible speed. The Horizon stayed close, its repair drones flying out to patch damage as it happened. Every action was precise, calculated, and human. There was no chaos, no shouting, only focus. and slowly the impossible began to happen. The Dravex ship started falling back. The Earth fleet had done what no other civilization had done before. They had stopped the Dravex advance. The enemy that had once erased entire species was now being pushed backward by humanity's creation, but even as victory began to take shape, no one on the Titan smiled. The crew knew the cost. Every maneuver, every power surge, every energy pulse drained the ship's systems to the limit. The reactors ran hot. The shields flickered. The AI warned of overload, but there was no turning back. In the command room, the leader of the fleet gave the final order. Send it. Across every communication channel, a single message was transmitted into the galaxy. It was short, emotional, and human. For the Syrians. For every life you took. This is Earth's answer. That message wasn't just words, it was history. It reached every outpost, every colony, and even the quiet edges of the known universe. It told everyone who was listening that Earth was no longer a silent observer. After hours that felt like days, the Dravex ships finally began to withdraw. One by one, they vanished into the darkness, leaving behind the wreckage of what they had lost. When the last signal disappeared, the Titan's engines powered down. The crew sat quietly, staring at the empty space before them. No one cheered. No one spoke. The silence was too heavy for celebration. Back on Earth, when the news arrived, people filled the streets. They lit candles, raised flags, and looked toward the night sky. For the first time since the Syrians were destroyed, hope returned. The images of the shining warships orbiting above Earth spread everywhere, filling hearts with pride and tears. But inside the council chambers, there was no celebration. The leaders knew the truth. This wasn't over. The Dravex had retreated but not defeated. They had only tested Earth's power, and now they understood it. The real war had not yet begun. In the quiet hours after the battle, the fleet drifted near the ruins of the Syrian planet. The horizon sent out rescue drones to search for survivors, but there were none, only silence. One of the engineers looked through the window at the gray planet below. "We did it," he said softly. "But it doesn't feel like victory." The others nodded. It was true. What they had done was necessary, but it had changed something inside them. Humanity had proven its strength, but in doing so, it had also shown its power to destroy. The warships remained still for a long time, their lights glowing faintly in the dark. The stars around them seemed distant and cold. Then slowly the fleet turned toward home. As the Titan began its return journey, a soft voice from the ship's AI echoed through the control room. "Mission complete." Awaiting new directives, no one answered. The crew just looked out at the stars. They knew this was only the beginning. Far away in the unexplored darkness, the Dravex regrouped. Their ships floated silently, repairing, watching, planning, and deep within their hidden territories, something even larger was awakening. Something that would make the last battle look small. But for now, the galaxy was quiet again. Earth had spoken. The stars had listened, and somewhere beyond the silence a promise still burned bright. Never again would humanity let its friends fall without a fight. Months had passed since the battle that changed everything. The galaxy had finally gone quiet, but it was the kind of silence that made people uneasy. The warships had returned home, the heroes had been welcomed with cheers, and the world had celebrated a victory no one thought possible. Yet, beneath the surface of those celebrations, a shadow remained. In the skies above Earth, the Titan floated silently in orbit, its armor scarred, its engines tired, its once bright hull now darkened by the memory of war. Every mark on its surface told a story. People called it the shield of humanity. Children looked up at it with pride. But those who had been inside the ship knew the truth. Victory came with a heavy price. The crew had returned home, but few of them could truly rest. The faces of the lost Syrians still haunted their dreams. They remembered the ruins, the silence, the burning message in space, "Your turn." Even after driving the Dravex back, they knew it wasn't the end. The Dravex were not a race that surrendered. They were a force that learned, adapted, and came back stronger. Back on Earth, the Defense Council held daily meetings deep beneath the surface. Reports came in from across the solar system. Strange signals were appearing again. Faint, shifting, but familiar. Some came from the outer planets, others from deep space where no one should have been. It was as if the stars themselves were whispering warnings. Scientists tried to decode them, but nothing made sense. The messages were fragments of sound, distorted patterns of energy, yet one pattern kept repeating, a rhythm almost identical to the signal the Dravex had sent before the first invasion. The meaning was clear. They were coming back, and this time they would not stop at revenge. The Council didn't panic. They had learned from the past. This time they would be ready before the enemy arrived. Massive construction yards lit up all over the world. The air filled with the sound of engines, welding sparks, and thunder. Factories that once made satellites and cargo ships were now building something new, something bigger. Earth's engineers had taken everything they learned from the first battle and pushed it beyond imagination. They were creating warships that could think faster, move smoother, and endure longer than anything before. Each vessel carried fragments of Sirian technology, energy cores that drew power directly from the vacuum of space itself. But there was one ship everyone was waiting for, the Leviathan. It was said to be larger than the Titan, stronger than the Vanguard, and more advanced than any ship built by human hands. Its design came from a secret file found in the ruins of the Syrian capital, a blueprint never completed by its creators. Humanity finished it in their name. When the first image of the Leviathan was revealed, the entire planet watched. It wasn't just a ship. It looked like a moving city, with towers of light running across its body and massive wings of metal spreading out like a guardian in the dark. It was Earth's final warning to the stars, but while the world celebrated, some within the fleet were uneasy. They knew something that most people didn't. The Syrian technology was powerful but not fully understood. It worked like magic, bending light, energy, and gravity. No human had built it from scratch. They had only copied fragments. There were risks they couldn't predict. Still, there was no other choice. Humanity was standing on a thin line, and hesitation could mean extinction. Soon the three great ships, the Titan, Horizon, and Vanguard, were repaired and armed again. The Leviathan was placed at the center, surrounded by the smaller escort vessels. Together, they formed what was now called the Earth Defense Armada. It was a name that echoed across every station and colony. The message was clear. Earth was not afraid anymore. As the fleet prepared to depart, people across the world gathered to watch the launch. From deserts to cities, from mountains to oceans, millions looked to the night sky. The ships rose slowly, glowing against the darkness like new stars being born. Children waved flags, families stood together, and for a brief moment, humanity felt united again. But in the middle of that pride, a quiet fear still lived. No one truly knew what the Dravex were capable of. The first battle had shown only a fraction of their power. If they were preparing to strike again, what would they bring this time? Weeks passed. The fleet patrolled the edges of the solar system, searching for signs of movement. They found strange energy trails that led nowhere, as if something invisible was passing through space. Drones disappeared without warning. Communications from outposts near Neptune went silent, and then one night, the stars began to move. The first sign came from a deep space observation post, blinding flashes of light in the far distance, followed by complete blackout. The signal stopped mid-transmission. Every system monitoring the outer sectors started lighting up with alerts. Something massive was entering the system. When the fleet received the data, the room fell silent. The Dravex ships had returned, but they were not like before. Their designs were darker, smoother, almost alive. They didn't move like machines. They flowed through space like creatures, their hulls glowing with energy veins that pulsed like hearts. At the center of their formation was something colossal, a shape so large it blocked the light of the stars behind it. It wasn't a ship. It looked like a floating fortress, miles long, covered in rings of moving energy. No one had ever seen anything like it. Sensors couldn't measure its power. The readings went off the scale. The message came again, just like before. The same deep voice, but clearer this time. You resist, it said. You destroy. You will learn. That was all. Inside the Titan, tension spread like electricity. The crew moved into position without hesitation. They had done this before, but this time felt different. There was a chill in the air, a strange silence between words. Even the hum of the engine sounded nervous. From the Leviathan's command bridge, the fleet leader gave a calm order. No one fires first, he said quietly. We stand ready. Minutes passed. Then suddenly the massive Dravex fortress began to glow. Rings of light spun faster and faster around it. Energy waves rippled outward, bending space itself. The Leviathan sensors started failing. The crew shouted updates as screens flickered. The fortress wasn't attacking, it was doing something else. It was opening. Before anyone could react, the darkness split apart. Behind the fortress, something emerged, massive, silent, and shimmering like glass. It wasn't a ship. It was a portal. From within the swirling light, new signals appeared, thousands of them. They were calling reinforcements. The entire fleet watched in disbelief. Humanity had faced one arm of the Dravex Empire before, but now, they were seeing the full force of it, an army that stretched across galaxies. Inside the Leviathan, a quiet voice broke the silence. "If we run, Earth falls," it said, and with that the order was given. The fleet turned toward the enemy. Engines roared to life, weapons powered up, and energy shields shimmered across every hull. The stars were filled with light again, not from sunrise, but from the fire of warships awakening. The first exchange of energy filled space with blinding color. Blue met red, light met shadow, and for a moment it seemed like the universe itself was trembling. The Leviathan's cannons fired beams that cut through enemy lines, while the Titan and Vanguard circled to protect its flanks. But the Dravex fortress didn't fall. It absorbed the attacks, feeding on the energy like a living being. The portal behind it grew larger, brighter, hungrier. The crew of the Titan realized what was happening. The fortress wasn't just a ship. It was a gatekeeper, opening a path for the rest of the Dravex fleet to enter. If they didn't stop it now, nothing would stop the invasion of Earth. Inside the Leviathan, systems began to overload. Sparks flew, alarms screamed, and still no one backed down. Every person on board knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another battle. It was the moment that would decide the future of humanity itself. And even as the stars around them burned with the light of war, a single thought echoed in every heart. They destroyed our allies, but they will never destroy us. The Leviathan turned toward the fortress, engines glowing brighter than ever before. Its energy core pulsed, ready for something no one had ever tried. It wasn't just preparing to fight. It was preparing to sacrifice. As the ship charged forward, the fleet followed close behind. They weren't just defending Earth anymore. They were defending everything that made them human. Loyalty, love, and the promise that they would never stop fighting for what was right. The universe watched in silence as the largest war humanity had ever fought began. And somewhere, far away, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The stars were on fire. The sky beyond the fleet was filled with light, color, and motion, thousands of ships clashing in silence. It wasn't just a battle. It was the kind of moment that would be remembered for generations. Humanity had never stood this close to the edge before. The Leviathan led the charge, glowing like a blue sun in the darkness. Energy waves rippled off its hull as it powered through enemy fire. The Titan and Vanguard flanked it on both sides, their engines burning bright, covering each other as they moved closer to the massive Dravex fortress. Behind them, smaller human vessels darted between enemy lines, brave and unrelenting. Every second mattered. The portal behind the fortress grew larger with every passing minute. If it opened fully, the entire Dravex Empire could flood through, and Earth would stand no chance. Inside the Leviathan's control deck, tension filled the air. Sparks flew from panels, alarms flickered, but the crew didn't stop. Their faces were tired, eyes filled with determination. They knew what had to be done. There was no room for fear now. The leader's voice came through the communicator, calm but heavy. "We're going to end this here. The fortress draws power from that portal. If we cut the energy flow, it'll collapse." A technician looked up, his voice shaking. "But to cut it, someone has to get close enough to the core." The leader paused. "Then we'll get close." It wasn't a command, it was a promise. The Leviathan's engines roared louder as it moved straight toward the fortress. Enemy fire rained down like lightning, but the warship held its course. Its shields glowed and cracked under pressure, but still it pressed forward. The Titan and Vanguard shifted positions, drawing the enemy's attention, giving the Leviathan the opening it needed. The Dravex ships swarmed like shadows, trying to block the way. Every time one was hit, another took its place. It was endless. But humanity was not fighting with numbers. They were fighting with something else. Something stronger. Hope. Inside every ship, people remembered what they were fighting for. Families waiting back home. The faces of those lost in the First War. The promise they made to the Syrians that Earth would not let their sacrifice be forgotten. That promise was their strength. The Titan's weapons glowed white-hot as it unleashed its last round of plasma bursts. The Vanguard darted through the chaos, releasing a wave of energy that pushed back the enemy for a moment. The Leviathan used that small window to break through. As it neared the fortress, the view outside the windows changed. The stars disappeared, replaced by a swirling sea of light. The fortress wasn't just metal. It was alive, pulsing with strange patterns that looked almost organic. It hummed, like something breathing. Then the reading spiked. The portal's pulling energy from the Leviathan's core. A voice shouted, "It's trying to drain us." The ship began to shake violently. Panels burst open, lights flickered, systems started shutting down one by one. The AI's calm voice echoed, core stability at 32%, reactor overload imminent. The leader stood in silence for a moment, watching the readings fall. Then he looked out at the fortress through the wide glass window. "If it wants our energy," he said softly, "then let's give it everything." The crew stared in disbelief. They knew what he meant. The Leviathan's core wasn't just powerful, it was unstable when overcharged. If they reversed the flow, it could release a blast strong enough to destroy the fortress and collapse the portal. But it would also destroy the Leviathan. The silence was heavy. Then one by one the crew members nodded. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. They weren't just soldiers, they were protectors. And sometimes protectors don't come home. The leader gave the order. Prepare the core for reversal. The Titan picked up the message instantly. Its commander's voice came through, quiet but firm. "We'll cover you." And that's what they did. The Titan and Vanguard moved in closer, shields overlapping, taking the full force of the Dravex assault. Their hulls glowed red, energy fields flickering, but they didn't retreat. They stayed in front of the Leviathan like two walls of light, blocking every hit that came its way. Inside the Leviathan, the lights dimmed. The hum of the engines grew deeper. The core was charging faster and faster until the entire ship began to vibrate. Every surface glowed with a bright blue light. But something strange began to happen. Through the scanners, they noticed the portal wasn't just reacting, it was changing. The energy lines twisted, shapes shifting inside it like waves. Then, for a brief moment, they saw something through the light. Shapes, faces, millions of them. The lost Syrians. It was as if the energy of their destroyed world had been trapped inside the portal all along. The Leviathan's charge was waking them. The crew stood silent, eyes wide. The leader whispered softly, "They're still here." The energy in the room became almost peaceful. It wasn't just destruction anymore, it was connection. The Syrians' energy seemed to reach out, merging with the Leviathan's. The ship's lights turned from blue to gold. Every screen flickered. Every sensor went off the charts. The portal started collapsing on itself, folding inward like it was being swallowed by light. The Dravex fortress began to crack, huge chunks breaking apart and drifting into the void. The Leviathan's systems screamed warnings, but no one stopped. They watched as the fortress broke open, and the once dark portal began to close, glowing brighter and brighter until it filled every window with light. The Titan and Vanguard pulled back just in time, their engines struggling to escape the blast zone. The Leviathan stayed behind, locked in place, surrounded by the golden glow. From Earth, the people watching the live transmission saw something that didn't look like war. It looked like a sunrise in the middle of space. The dark sky lit up, turning gold and white, spreading across the stars like a wave of peace. When the light faded, the fortress was gone. The portal was gone. The Dravex fleet had vanished into silence, and the Leviathan was gone too. Only the Titan and Vanguard remained, drifting quietly among the floating pieces of metal. The stars returned calm and still as if nothing had ever happened. The surviving crew sent out one final message to Earth. The voice was quiet, full of both pride and sorrow. "The Leviathan did it," it said. "The portal's closed. The Dravex are gone. The Syrians, they're free now." There was silence after that. When the fleet returned home, there were no fireworks this time. There were candles, flags, and tears. People gathered in every city, not to celebrate, but to remember. They knew that their victory had come with a cost. In the years that followed, stories of the Leviathan spread everywhere. Some said it had been destroyed completely. Others believed it had crossed into another dimension, carried away by the same energy that once belonged to the Syrians. Some even claimed that on quiet nights they could see a faint golden light in the sky, like a guardian watching over Earth. The Titan was repaired and placed in orbit again, not as a weapon, but as a monument. Its engines were never reignited. It became a symbol, a reminder of what humanity had done and what it had lost. Children grew up hearing about the people who had given everything to protect the galaxy. They didn't talk about war or destruction. They talked about courage, unity, and hope. The kind of hope that could light up even the darkest corner of space. And somewhere deep in that vast silence among the stars that once burned with battle, a faint golden glow still drifted, the energy of the Leviathan. It was said that whenever a new world looked up at the sky and saw that light, they would remember one thing, that Earth, the small blue planet once overlooked by the universe, had stood up against darkness not with hate, but with heart, because even in the cold silence of space, humanity had proven something timeless. You can destroy ships, you can erase worlds, but you can never destroy the will to protect what's right. The war was over. Peace had returned. Not the quiet peace of fear, but the deep peace born from sacrifice and unity. And in that peace, among the shining stars, the name Leviathan became more than just a ship. It became a promise that as long as there were stars in the sky, and hearts that could dream, Earth would always stand guard.